Alright, hello, welcome. My name is Shaina, and today we are talking about something that I love very much. Yes, obviously astrology, but specifically one of my favorite things in astrology, which is progressed charts. I pay so much attention to these things, maybe too much attention to these things. But yes, before I get any more into it, let me just get the advertising out of the way really quick. So I sell birth chart readings on my website, shainaemilyastrology.com. I have an astrology TikTok and I have a personal Instagram. Alright, so let's just get into the video. So this video was inspired by a comment I actually received on my last video, which I spoke about my progressed Sagittarius moon that I just ended about a few months ago. But on that video, this lovely viewer posted this comment. It had a bunch of questions about progressed charts in it, and I was like, I really want to answer all of these, but I want to answer it more than just a reply. I should make just a whole video about progressed charts. So I will answer every single question in this comment, but I'm also going to hopefully cover everything else as well. So if you know absolutely nothing about progressed charts, you only know that you have a birth chart, or maybe you know a little bit about progressed charts, but you haven't really delved deep into what they are, how to read them, what to pay attention to, what to focus on, the rules or whatever, which, I mean, there's no rules in astrology, but you know what I mean. The technicalities, I guess, or whatever it may be. Now, if there are any questions that you have about progressed charts that I did not touch on in this video, please ask that down below and I will get back to you. And yes, also, if you didn't watch the last video, I've moved again, and thus this awful blue wall that I'm gonna probably complain about in every video, but that's okay. It drives me crazy. So the first question that you're gonna ask, of course, is what is a progressed chart? Basically, a progressed chart talks about what stage of life are you in. So when you go on an astrology website and you put in your information, what you're pulling up is your natal birth chart. This is basically the second that you were born, what was going on in the constellations at that moment. It's a screenshot of the sky, right? And our natal chart is who we are, and we always relate to it. We always look back to it and feel like that's who we instinctually are. But however, as we get older, obviously we grow and we change. New traits come up in our life, new challenges that we didn't have before come up, maybe even new talents that we never realized we had come up, right? All of this will be shown through the progressed chart. If you want to get technical, a progressed chart is basically a type of predictive chart in astrology that is derived from the natal chart, which shows one's evolution over time. So every planet in the sky has a set amount of time that they spend in a sign. So for example, the moon changes sign every about 2.5 days. The sun changes sign every about 30 days, which that we know we call, Taurus season, Gemini season, whatever it might be. And then social planets, like for example, Jupiter takes a year to change through a sign. And then even something like an outer planet like Pluto takes anywhere between 15 years to 30 years to go through just one sign. This is relevant to progressed charts because basically how a progressed chart is calculated is that for every year of your life, the progressed chart moves one day. It starts on your birthday, right? And then for every year it slowly moves. 1 year later, the chart will have moved one day. So it's very valid if you feel like, wow, I used to really be a Venus and Leo, but then I got older and I settled down and I make sure that I'm really there and steady and solid for my partner. Maybe you're a progressed Venus and Virgo and that Venus and Leo is still true, but now you're showing a more Venus and Virgo side to you. So I love paying attention to my progressed chart because it kind of shows the flavor of the week or the flavor of every 2.5 years, which I'll touch into why I say that in a second. But it's just really relevant to what's going on with you right now. What traits do you still have from birth? What are new ones? It just kind of helps evaluate yourself currently a little bit better. Also, you have to think about the fact that dreams that you had when you were a kid are probably not the same dreams that you have now when you're older, and that's also shown in the progressed chart. All right, question number 2 is how do you find your progressed chart? It's very easy. It's just like you find your birth chart, basically. There are some websites that offer progressed chart calculations, and then there are a few that don't, so I'll go over which ones do and don't. AstroTheme, AstroSeek, and Astro.com all offer progressed chart calculations. However, they are called secondary progressions, so look for your secondary progressions chart. As far as I know, AstroCharts and Astro Cafe does not offer progressed chart calculations. It might just be under another name. I might just not know. Who knows? But that's what I'm aware of so far. Number 3, and this is really, really important to pay attention to if you're wanting to come away from this video kind of knowing how to read a progressed chart, and that is number 3, how quickly do each of the planets move in a progressed chart? So as I mentioned in the first question, for every year of your life, the chart moves 1 day. So for example, in the progressed chart, for every year of your life, the sun moves just under 1 degree a year. So if you were born at 0 degree Aries, when you're about 28 to 31, you are going to be a progressed Taurus sun. My dog is a 1 degree Aries sun, actually. First day of spring. So we go through, anywhere between 1 to about 3 sun signs throughout our whole lifetime, just depending on how old you live to and, the calculations and everything. So it is a very, very big deal if you see in somebody's progressed chart or your progressed chart that the sun has shifted sign. That is definitely something to take note of, and that is definitely something to pay attention to. The biggest thing to pay attention to, if you pull up a progressed chart, you're a little bit new to astrology and reading charts, and you only want to focus on one thing, focus on the moon in the progressed chart. And that is because, as we know, the moon in the sky is the fastest moving planet and luminary, and it moves sign every 2.5 days. And in the progressed chart, that means that it is the fastest moving planet or luminary as well, and it moves sign every 2.5 years, 2 to 2.5 years roughly, depending. Maybe I'm a Cancer rising and I'm biased, but the moon in my mind in the progressed chart really shows kind of the stage of life you're in, the flavor of life that you are currently experiencing, what themes will come up, what lessons you're probably focusing on needing to learn. It also just helps you kind of be prepared for whatever block and chunk of life you're coming into. It also is super helpful to pay attention to the progressed moon because it kind of does help me compartmentalize and categorize my life. I can be like, oh, when I went to college, that was the 2.5 years that I was a progressed Virgo moon. And then, when I was a progressed Scorpio moon, I lost my mom. It's easy to kind of keep track of time in that way. And that's kind of now how I kind of like chunk out my life. It's like, oh yeah, that was during my Sagittarius moon period. So yeah, I spent that money or whatever. And yeah, so basically that breaks down to, in your progressed chart, the moon moves 1 degree a month, which is really fast for the progressed chart, honestly. And so new aspects are coming up on that thing all the time. The house placement changes pretty quickly. So it's just really, really good to pay attention to. It really tells you what is happening in that person's or your life currently. If you're curious, Mercury moves 1 to 2 degrees per year, but this does really vary depending on retrogrades. It can last a really long time in the same sign. My Mercury has been in Capricorn my whole life, and it's gonna be there for a little bit more time still. So Venus moves just a little bit over 1 degree a year, but again, count for retrogrades as with any other planet. Mars moves approximately 0.5 degree a year, again, depending on retrograde. So you can have the same Mars sign for your whole life. You probably will not. And then it also is very important to note that the outer planets, especially like Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus that move so slow, will probably not be changing sign in your lifetime. And if they do, it will move 1 sign, and that's because you're probably like a 20 degree Neptune, and then years later in your life, it moves 1 sign to 0 degrees. But that's pretty much it. It is really imperative to pay attention to the house placements that the outer planets are in. That's kind of the only thing I look at, and any new aspects to moving inner planets, especially the moon, obviously. And again, if you have interceptions or not in a progressed chart, those interceptions can become unintercepted. And also, if you don't have an interception in your natal chart, you can occur interceptions throughout your life. Maybe you had an intercepted sun when you were born and you had a lot of trouble finding individuality, you had a lot of trouble finding your light, you had a lot of trouble finding your creativity, all that sort of stuff. And then for some reason, when you hit 18, you were able to go off to art school and you found your sun brighter than ever and your sun became unintercepted. Might be a story. Now, for a while, I did not understand how the rising sign moves in the progressed chart, but it actually accounts for the fact that basically at the start of one day to the end of one day, the rising sign changes 1 degree. your rising sign will change approximately, give or take a little bit, 1 degree a year. So it again is a big deal when your rising sign changes. That is a huge thing to pay attention to. We again go through about 1 to 3 rising signs in our lifetimes. And when we do change rising signs, a lot of things change about our appearance and a lot of things change about our perspective of life. It is a huge, huge shift. So it is an important thing to look into. Number 4 is just a general question that you hear a lot as an astrologer, and it is, why don't I feel like my natal chart? Or why do I not feel like this specific natal placement? And this is almost always because that placement is in a very late degree. Now, sometimes it's because you're a Cancer sun and that's your only placement in Cancer, and that Cancer sun is super debilitated, and so you don't really feel like a Cancer sun. You still are, but that's the other one. But a lot of times I see it as being, let's say you have a 29-degree Capricorn sun, and when you turned 1 year old, you became an Aquarius, and you're now in your mid-20s, and you've lived most of your life as a progressed Aquarius sun. That might be why you don't fully relate as much to a Capricorn sun. You still are, like, I promise you, like, people looking from the outside in will see traits in you that are that Capricorn sun or whatever that placement might be, but you will take on the qualities of an Aquarius sun a little bit more, or whatever that energy or placement is. This is also why it really bothers me when people say something like 4 degrees is a cusp energy. I do not believe that 4 degrees, 3 degrees, 2 degrees, or 1 degrees. I believe only 0 degrees to be a true and proper cusp, but something like 3 degrees or 4 degrees, let's say you're a Pisces Venus, you're going to spend most of your life as a Pisces Venus, and you'll probably wind up feeling more like a Pisces Venus than a late degree Pisces Venus who has already progressed into Aries. It is really good to pay attention to the degrees of your placements also, because it will show how much more you've sat in that energy before you've progressed into the next. Question number 5 is, which is more important, progress charts or natal charts? This is also addressing the comment that the lovely viewer said, which is, I want to keep my natal placements. Okay, don't worry, you are still your natal placements. And if anybody were to ask me my big 3, I would never, ever, ever give them my progressed big 3. But I will say, if you do look at your progressed big 3, it can kind of show how your style kind of has evolved over time. Like, for example, my natal big 3 is Capricorn sun, Capricorn moon, Cancer rising, and I feel very, very connected to that. I would always say that's who I am. That's my instincts. That is what it is, and it will always be that. But for example, in my progressed chart, I'm an Aquarius sun, my moon just progressed back into Capricorn, and I'm a Leo rising. And I do think that is a little bit more of what I might look like physically right now, but I definitely will always feel like and will always resonate the most and substantially with my natal big 3. Also, I would not suggest looking up Leo rising, for example, if you're progressed Leo rising, and thinking that's how it's going to translate with you, because it's not necessarily. You have to think about the fact that you have a natal placement, and that natal placement always colors the progressed placement. So you also have to think about those relationships, like how does having a natal Cancer rising color the fact that my progressed rising is in Leo? I would always say that your natal placements take so much precedence and always influence and color on top of everything else that astrology brings. Your natal placements are going to affect you the most because it is your initial conditioning. Number 6 are, what parts of a progressed chart do you pay attention to, which is important? For example, are progressed houses important? What about progressed aspects? Progressed signs, progressed interceptions, what counts and what doesn't? Because when I was first looking into progressed charts, I remember seeing something somewhere online that said, you only pay attention to the sign, you don't pay attention to the rising sign, and you don't pay attention to the houses. And I remember feeling like I really disagreed with that, and that the rising sign is relevant, the houses are relevant, and I kind of said, I'm gonna crumple that up and throw that away and pay attention to it. And I've definitely mostly seen information where you pay attention to your progressed rising sign and all that sort of stuff. So obviously, like, you can use whatever you want at your discretion. That's kind of the point of astrology. But if I'm being honest, I look at everything. But as I've mentioned, I especially pay attention to, has the rising sign, sun, Venus or Mars changed from their natal placement? What moon sign, house, and aspects are they going through and will be going through and just went through? As well as, do they currently have any interceptions, or do they have things unintercepted? And then lastly, if I'm really looking, I'll see what outer planets have moved houses. And that's kind of honestly the order that I go in when I'm reading a progressed chart, and kind of the order that I pay attention to when I'm reading my own progressed chart as well. So basically, I honestly think everything is important. It's just what speaks to you, and that's the whole point of having your own individualized practice and your own bias while reading charts. Number 7 is, what is the difference between transits and progressed placements? You might have thought that predictions in astrology had to do with taking a natal chart and then taking the skies chart, overlapping the two, and seeing the relationship between them. Now that is actually transits. These are still relevant. I always pay attention to them. If you want a whole video about transits, I can do that as well. But transits are basically the outer world affecting us, whereas progressed placements and aspects are how we are dealing with the outer world affecting us. So basically, it's like transits are the cause and the progressed chart is the effect. Because again, the progressed chart has to do with us, and our natal chart has nothing to do with what's going on outside of us. It's like how we are dealing with things, how we are feeling, all that sort of stuff. So we could be having really bad transits, but be going through a really good moon because maybe your moon's okay with the chaos and used to it, or vice versa. And just as a little side note, with transits, I pay more attention to the outer planets, and with progressed charts, I pay more attention to the inner planets, which makes sense because transits are the sky and the outer world, which is, outer planets affecting us, and progressed chart is how we are affecting the outer world. So now you know what a progressed chart is. You have all this information of kind of what to look to, what to pay attention to, what it means, how it's calculated, all this sort of stuff, but you do not know how to interpret it and what to do with the fact that you have a progressed Leo moon. What does that even mean? Okay, so number 8 is how to read or how to interpret a progressed chart. So the first thing that I always like to say with progressed charts is that do not interpret the progressed energy as immediate. So for example, let's say you just became a progressed Scorpio rising and you've spent your whole life as a Libra rising. You're not going to go from wearing frilly dresses or nice clean cut clothes to waking up the next day and putting on dark eyeliner under your eye, dyeing your hair black from blonde, and wearing spooky clothes and chokers. Obviously nothing is that literal, but I've actually seen a Libra rising go through that exact transition, but it's over time, okay? You have to realize that it's not going to happen overnight, especially with progressed energies. I would say you kind of get a rumbling for the fact that change is going to happen to you, right? Before change happens, you kind of get that rumbling first. So maybe let's take this Libra rising scenario. Maybe you are a Libra rising and you've had this rumbling of, I'm kind of over how my parents make me dress. I'm kind of over, all these flowers. I'm going through changes or whatever. I'm all angry and angsty now, but I'm still wearing the same clothes. I might have a little bit more of an attitude, but then maybe this Libra rising gets into a relationship, and that's what happens at the end of their Libra rising, and they get into a relationship with a very Scorpionic person, and they start taking on those traits more, and then this person's been in the relationship for about 5 months, and then their rising progresses into Scorpio, and then maybe they start dressing a little bit darker as they become, 1 degree, 2 degree Scorpio rising. It becomes more sad into it, and then after a while, they don't need to dress like it just is, but yeah, whatever. That's just kind of like an example, I guess, of how you would see it actually interpreted. Let's take a progressed Capricorn moon, for example. Let's say you have no Capricorn energy in your chart at all. You have a really weak Saturn, not really a strong 10th house, right? And you have a lot of water energy. You are not one prone to Capricorn vibes. It's not like you're gonna wake up and you're gonna all of a sudden be a super hard worker and super organized and super disciplined. That's the big difference with the natal versus progressed interpretation, is that with your natal chart, you are your natal chart. There is no talking it out of you. It is what it is, and you just have to work with it. You have to decide which sides of things you want to show. But now with this progressed chart, you aren't automatically this. right? It's not something that you can't bargain yourself out of. You bargain yourself out of and go to your natal placements if you do that. But in the progressed chart, you have to work at it. You have to learn this energy. When you're at the beginning stages in your progressed chart of a new sign, you're probably going to really fumble that energy unless you have a bunch of energy in it natally or whatever, and it's comfortable for you. Then you'll be like, yes, this is my comfort zone. I got this. I'm doing what I love. I'm happy, or whatever it might be. But with something that you're new to, like that person is probably with this water energy, with this progressed Capricorn moon, they're going to probably have to get a job and not want to. They're probably going to have to work hard at work that they don't want to do. Maybe they're cut off from their family and they have to earn their own money for the first time and they don't want to do that. Maybe they have to show a much more unemotional side and they don't get to be creative and spontaneous and fun like they used to, and that sucks. It's all about how do you take on that challenge of that new sign as well. It's not just all like, oh, I'm a new sign, I get to throw away my problems of my old one and take on the great stuff of the new one. You have to learn that energy. You have to adjust into it. For example, something like you might hear like, oh, a Scorpio moon is really hard to have natally, but maybe you have a really good relationship with Scorpio and you have a really smooth Scorpio progressed moon, but your Sagittarius moon is really rough because you hate the instability of it or whatever it may be. But so that's a big thing in interpretation. What is Sagittarius is still relevant. When you're going through your progressed Sagittarius moon, those Sagittarius themes are still relevant. That is still how you interpret it. You go, oh, this is going to be a time where I travel a lot, new things happen, I have to take on new tasks every day, it's going to be very spontaneous, right? But how you deal with that is shown through the progressed aspects as well as through the natal chart. So that is a big thing to pay attention to. A very important concept that I pay a lot of attention to in the progressed chart, especially because I'm kind of currently going through it, and I know a lot of people around my age are going through it, and that is the progressed lunar return. So basically what that means is that happens between the age around 26 to 27, normally closer to 27, but just depends. It's when your moon makes a full cycle around all 12 signs and it comes back to your natal moon. So for example, if you're an Aries moon, that means your moon progressed through all Taurus through Pisces, and it is now back in your natal placement of Aries. And so that means you're going through your progressed Aries moon return. And this is a big deal. You go through about, maybe 2, maximum of 3 in your lifetime if you live till being really old. Our third one comes when we are about 50, so it makes sense. It's that midlife crisis time. And the first one is when you're 27, as I mentioned. If you know, connects to the 27 Club, which is just basically when a bunch of famous, celebrities or musicians and artists, they die when they're 27. It's kind of a thing. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jean-Michel Basquiat, I'm going to say that wrong, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, a bunch of people are all part of the 27 Club. It's because your progressed lunar return is really hard on you emotionally. Basically, with every new progressed moon sign placement that you go through, it feels like a new stage of life. It feels like a new, even like chance at life. It feels like a new, new themes. It's like, I have some Sagittarius energy, so I like the feeling of learning new things. I like going into a new moon sign. Also, when you go through each moon sign, it's like exploring or highlighting one facet of your personality. So it's like, oh, now I get to really play this facet of my personality. Now this one, right? You're gaining new experiences. You're learning new things about yourself. It's interesting. You're growing. But when you get to your progressed lunar return, it's like, oh, I've gone all this way, I've done all these things, I've learned all these lessons, and I'm still just the same person I've always been. So this can kind of be crushing for people that are famous when they're really young, for example, because it's like, oh, I thought, for example, when I got all this fame or when I was successful that I would change, that I would be different, that somehow I would get better, that it would just fix everything. And the progressed lunar return is kind of like you can't run from who you are. This is the reality of who you are. And it can also be really hard because you've gone through all the signs, so it feels like, oh, there's nothing new anymore. I know everything, I learn everything. And so that it can feel like that spark is kind of going out. Now that's not true, because even though you've been through all the signs in the houses now, you're going to be going through them again in differently colored areas because your rising sign has probably moved one sign. So for example, like say you went through your progressed Pisces moon in your 4th house and you're like, oh, I've already know that. When you go through your progressed Pisces moon again, it'll probably be in your 3rd house. So you still have different facets of your personality you haven't explored, but boy, does it feel deflating. Does it feel like, what was all of this for? Does it feel like, oh great, I've been through all this and I have the same problems that I've always had? It can be a little bit hard. It's a little bit of like a reality check. Now, sometimes it can be very positive because it can be like, oh, you finally get to fulfill your natal moon. You get all these things that you always wanted. You get these themes, you know, if it's really healthy and it's doing really good. So sometimes it can be like, oh wow, you know, you can get a lot of satisfaction from your progressed lunar return. But for the most part, I would say that it's a little tough. Now, I might just be saying this through my bias because I'm going through the very beginning of it. So it's when it's at its toughest because it's the newest to me. Well, I say that, but it'll probably be the toughest in the middle, and then I'll say it at the end too, but whatever. But it can also be a very fulfilling, rewarding, solidifying, and like solidifying in the way of like, oh, this is who I am. I know who I am now, which can be a very comforting feeling that we don't really feel for the first 25 years of our life. Number 9, and I'm pretty sure this is a direct question from that comment, and it is, are rising signs important when paying attention to forecasts? And the other side of the question is, do transits count for progressed charts? So first of all, this is totally based off of an opinion. You can do whatever charts you want. You can draw up crazy progressed composite, you know, draconic charts and do the synastry of you and those 2 charts between your partners, and then, you know, or whatever it is. It gets crazy. It gets to be too much, and then it all goes into itself. So you can technically, yes, you can do whatever you want. Now, what do I do personally? Yeah, no, I do not pay attention to my progressed rising sign for forecasts, and I would not do that when I'm reading a chart. I wouldn't recommend somebody to do that. Now, if I was in a reading and somebody did that, I wouldn't stop them though. I would definitely be like, oh yeah, like, let me hear what you'd have to say. I wouldn't personally look at this, but maybe it'll gain some insight. No, I personally just pay attention to my natal rising sign. And that's coming from somebody who doesn't really like their natal rising sign. I have a better relationship with it now, but I am my natal rising sign. Like, it is what it is. I would feel like an imposter if I went through my progressed rising sign because I don't express it like that, you know? So personally, no. The second part of that question, do transits count for progressed charts? Again, yes, you can, but do I look at that? No. You know, there are certain things that I will do, like I will look into a progressed composite chart because I do think it is valid and interesting because relationships do really change and grow. What I'm trying to say, basically this adds up to me. If you were to read tarot and you were to ask one question and you were just going to just keep pulling over card and card over and over and over again, just until you get the response that you want, or you pull over all 78 cards and then it's like, well, then what's the point anymore? Now there's not an answer to this question. You're just pulling out cards. It's too big. It's too much, right? That's kind of what I feel like doing, you know, predictions for your progressed rising sign or doing progressed chart transits or whatever it might be. It kind of feels like pulling over like every tarot card for one question kind of situation, you know? All right, the last thing, number 10, is just some general advice that I have when looking into a progressed chart, when handling the concept of a progressed chart as a whole. And the first thing that's really big, that's really important, is look ahead at your own risk. And what I mean by that is that when you're looking into your progressed chart, you don't have to just look at what is going on right now. You can input whatever year you want. You can input when you were 1 and look at your progressed chart then. And you can input when you're 37. Look at your progressed chart then. When you're 68, look at your progressed chart then. You can basically look ahead fully into your life, right? And that is, in a way, a lot of power. And so I will like to warn everybody and put a big disclaimer in if you're somebody that can go really deep into things like I am, for example. I'm autistic, I'm really into it, right? I was definitely and still am definitely somebody that when I look in my progress chart, I will obsessively look into it. I will obsessively look into the future. I will see if my sun, you know, ever goes out of the 7th house, for example, and then be a Cancer rising and moan and groan about how it never does. Now I'm actually okay with it, and I'm glad it's not moving into the 6th or 8th house. Actually, I'll stick with it in the 7th. But you know what I mean? Like if you don't want to know the future, don't look ahead. You know, like I think it's good to look at what's going on with you right now, to check in right now. I think it's even really helpful to look at the past, reflect on things, get a different perspective, be like, oh, that's why during that time I had so much trouble getting up in the morning. It's because I was a progressed Pisces moon. Oh, I should have been nicer to myself, you know, I should have been kinder and should have understood it was just a phase. It was just a progressed Pisces moon phase. You know, now I'm out of it. I'm an Aries moon. I'm up at the crack of dawn, for example. You know, so it's good to look in the past. You can kind of heal some stuff, be nicer, but be cautious about looking into the future if you're not the kind of person that does well with that information. I usually love surprises, but I guess in life I really like spoiling things because I definitely have looked fully ahead at what's going on, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming and stressful. And if you're the kind of person that can drown, and if you're also the kind of person that will interpret things negatively, you know, and dwell on that, or even sometimes you can interpret things positively and have that be wrong and then be pissed off when that's not the result. So you just have to have a level of maturity when handling progress charts, and if you choose to look into the future or not. Like you can even look into the future of somebody that's like your partner and see if they will ever grow up or grow out of a certain phase that they're in. But again, you have to be careful. You know, like let's say you're married to somebody and you're hoping that they'll grow out of something, and you know it relates to this specific placement in their chart, and you look it up and they're never growing out of it, and you know you're just like a mess because now you're like, well, this will never happen. You're like, you know what I mean? Like you can just go into that stuff really easily. And also I will say that you do not know how things are going to turn out. You can think that XYZ is interpreted one way and it can come into your life in a very different way. And sometimes it's not helpful to have anxiety about stuff because that anxiety can create that thing to happen, if that makes sense. Now, sometimes you are just right and you can get confirmation through a progress chart, but again, just be careful if you choose to trudge ahead and look too far ahead in the future. Now, if you want to fucking do it, I did it, I'd do it again. I'm gonna keep doing it because I don't care. I have Uranus in the 8th house. I'm like not afraid of that stuff. You know what I mean? But you know what kind of person you are. So choose wisely. The next little piece of advice is actually a nice one. Now, you don't have to do this again if you're not somebody that has a calendar or, you know, is really interested in astrology or progress charts like that. But this is something that I've done that I found to be very positive with my progress chart, right? Not crazy maniacally looking into the future. But what I like to actually do is that at the beginning of every year, like in the December before the new year, I'll take a look at my progress chart and I'll basically go through it and make note of all the changes that are going on in the next year. So for example, if I know that my moon is going to change sign on this day, I am crazy and I do it to the exact day and I keep clicking it over and over, and yes, it is exhausting and I do it manually and I'm crazy. Now, if you don't care, you can just say, oh, it's in sometime in May. You know, I'll see that my moon changes sign and I'll write that on my calendar so I know. I'll see that I have a new aspect coming in. Maybe my sun is trine my moon now and I write that down. Maybe I'm losing an aspect. Maybe my sun isn't conjunct my Jupiter anymore and I write that down. You know, whatever it might be, it's really good to kind of take stock if you want to. If you're not somebody that wants to look into the future like that, you don't need to. But if you are somebody that is interested and curious, especially for me, I like to write down everything because everything for me is astrological research. It's all data. I need to know because I like to pay attention to things. I learn and I get all my information from astrology a lot of the times through observations and my own personal bias, as well as books, whatever. And so it's really vital for me to write this stuff down and pay attention to it and check in. So I always write down all my progress chart changes throughout the year. That has seemed to be something that is very valuable for me. And the last piece of advice, again, don't force your progressed chart, okay? It will happen naturally. It will come to you naturally. The chart is not a cause, it is an effect, and it's it already is what it is. That, you know, astrology is neutral. It just happens to be set in stone the way that it is. So you don't need to be stressed out that you're not being enough of a progressed Leo moon, or you're being too much of a progressed Leo moon. It is what it is. Don't force it. Don't try to push it. Don't try to push against it either. You have to have a level of acceptance. You have to kind of live with it, flow with it, you know? So yes, that concludes my video on progressed charts in astrology. I love this topic. If you have any questions or comments that I didn't address, please let me know down below. And if you have any video requests, also let me know down below. Again, I sell birth chart readings on shainaemily.com. I have a personal Instagram and I have an astrology TikTok. Thank you for watching. Bye.